I always thought family meant everything to my brother Sullivan, until the day I discovered his wedding announcement in the society pages of the Boston Globe. There it was in black and white. My own brother, married into the prestigious Martin family, without breathing a word to any of us. My name is Tori, and that morning changed everything. I was having breakfast with Mom at our small kitchen table, watching her do the crossword puzzle like she did every Sunday, when I nearly choked on my coffee. "Mom," I whispered, my hands trembling as I held the paper. "You need to see this." She looked up, reading glasses perched on her nose, and took the paper from my shaking hands. The color drained from her face as she read the announcement. The coffee pot between us grew cold as we sat in stunned silence. "But we just had dinner with him last week," she finally managed. "He didn't say anything about being engaged, let alone married." The announcement described an intimate ceremony at the Martin estate, complete with a string quartet and champagne fountain. The bride, Rosalie Martin, looked radiant in designer white. And there was Sullivan, my brother, beaming in a tuxedo that probably cost more than our monthly rent. "I'm calling him," I said, grabbing my phone. Mom reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. "Wait, honey, let's think about this." But I was already dialing. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again, and again. Finally, a text came through. "Can't talk now. On honeymoon. We'll explain everything later." "We'll explain everything later?" I read aloud, my voice cracking. "That's all he has to say?" Mom's shoulders slumped as she stared at the wedding photo. "I always wanted to see him in a tuxedo on his wedding day," she whispered. "I just thought I'd be there to see it." That's when the tears started falling down her cheeks. My mother, who'd raised us alone after Dad died, who'd worked 2 jobs to put food on our table, who'd never missed a single one of Sullivan's baseball games or my dance recitals, sat there crying over her Sunday crossword puzzle. I felt something snap inside me. 3 weeks later, Sullivan finally showed up at our door. He was tanned from his honeymoon, wearing an expensive watch that caught the light as he spread his hands apologetically. "It just happened so fast," he explained, pacing our small living room. "Rosalie's family, they have connections. They're opening doors for me I never dreamed possible." "Doors?" I interrupted. "What about the door to your own home? The one you walked out of without a word?" "Tori, please understand. This was a strategic decision. The Martins, they're different from us. They have expectations about these things. A big wedding would have been complicated." "Complicated?" Mom's voice was barely above a whisper. "We're complicated?" Sullivan ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair. "That's not what I meant. Look, I'm still me. I'm still your son, your brother. Nothing's changed." But everything had changed. I could see it in the way he kept checking his phone, the way his eyes darted around our modest living room like he was seeing it for the first time, and finding it wanting. "I have to go," he said after barely 15 minutes. "Board meeting in the morning, but I'll make it up to you both, I promise. Things are going to be different now. Better." After he left, Mom went to her room and closed the door. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the family photos on our refrigerator. Sullivan and me at the beach. Sullivan's college graduation, where Mom and I had cheered so loud we'd embarrassed him. All those memories, and he'd thrown them away for a champagne fountain and a string quartet. That night, I sat at my laptop until dawn, researching business schools and startup strategies. I'd always had a head for numbers, but I'd put my own ambitions on hold to help Mom with the bills after college. Now, looking at the acceptance letter I'd never opened from Harvard Business School, I made a decision. "I'm going back to school," I announced at breakfast the next morning. "And then I'm going to build something of my own. Something bigger than anything the Martins have." Mom looked up from her coffee, her eyes still red from crying. "Honey, don't let anger drive your decisions." "It's not anger, Mom," I said, even though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. "It's clarity. Sullivan showed us exactly who he is. Now it's my turn to show him who I am. I didn't know then that it would take me 7 years to build my revenge. I didn't know the price I'd pay, or the lessons I'd learn. I just knew that somewhere between that wedding announcement and my brother's dismissive goodbye, The path of my life had shifted, and I was ready to walk it no matter where it led. 7 years can change everything. I learned that sitting in my corner office, staring at the skyline of downtown Boston while Zoe, my best friend and business partner, paced in front of my desk. "Have you seen this?" She tossed a financial report onto my desk. "Sullivan's company is hemorrhaging money. Their stock dropped 30% this quarter alone." I picked up the report, scanning the numbers I'd already memorized. "Looks like the Martin family connections aren't worth what they used to be." "Are you smiling?" Zoe stopped pacing. "Tori, I know that look." I wasn't smiling. Not exactly. But seeing Sullivan's company falter stirred something in me I couldn't quite name. "We should consider acquiring them," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Their client base would complement our portfolio." "Their client base is jumping ship faster than rats from a burning building," Zoe countered. "Besides, isn't this a little personal?" The intercom buzzed before I could answer. "Ms. Wise, Mr. Oliver is here for your meeting." Deacon Oliver walked in moments later, impeccable in his tailored suit. As one of our major investors, he had a keen eye for opportunities and weaknesses. "Ladies," he nodded, taking a seat. "I assume you've seen the news about Sullivan Industries?" "We were just discussing it," Zoe said, shooting me a warning look. "Good." Deacon leaned forward. "Because I think we should make a play for them. Their technology patents alone are worth the investment." I kept my face carefully blank. "You think it's a good fit?" "I think it's perfect timing. They're vulnerable, we're strong. Simple as that." He paused, studying me. "Unless there's something I should know?" "No," I said quickly. Too quickly, Zoe jumped in. "We'll need to do our due diligence. Their financial situation is exactly why we should move now." Deacon interrupted. "Before someone else does." After he left, Zoe closed my office door and turned to me. "Are you really ready for this? To face him?" I thought about Mom, who still did her crossword puzzles every Sunday, leaving the chair across from her empty just in case. About the wedding invitations we never received to any of Sullivan's society events. About the way he'd dismissed our family like we were something to be ashamed of. "I'm more than ready," I said. That evening, I met Quinn, my mentor, for drinks at our usual spot. The bar was quiet, jazz playing softly in the background. "You've built something remarkable," Quinn said, swirling his scotch. "But revenge is a tricky business. It can consume you if you're not careful." "This isn't about revenge," I protested. "It's a sound business decision." Quinn's laugh was gentle but knowing. "Keep telling yourself that. Just remember, the moment you acquire his company, everything changes. Are you prepared for those changes?" I thought about the day I'd started this journey. How I'd walked into my first business class at Harvard with nothing but determination and a student loan. How I'd met Zoe in that class, and how we'd stayed up late planning our future company. How every setback had only made me work harder. "I built this company from nothing," I said, while Sullivan rode his wife's family connections straight to the top. Now he's falling, and I'm rising. That's not revenge. That's karma. "Karma doesn't usually require a hostile takeover," Quinn pointed out. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. It was Zoe. "Turn on the business news," she said without preamble. "Now." I signaled the bartender to change the channel. There was Sullivan, looking considerably less polished than his wedding photos, standing at a podium. "Confident that Sullivan Industries will weather this temporary setback," he was saying. "Our foundation is strong, our future is bright." "Liar," I whispered, watching his left eye twitch, a tell he'd had since childhood. "The market's not buying it," Zoe said in my ear. "Their stock dropped another 8% after hours." I watched my brother field questions, his confidence cracking slightly around the edges. He looked older, tired. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Then he said something that made my blood freeze. "My family has always believed in perseverance through adversity," he declared proudly. "It's how we were raised." Quinn must have seen my expression change. Tori? I stood up, grabbing my coat. Call the board, I told Zoe. First thing tomorrow, we're making our move. Are you sure? Zoe asked. He wants to talk about family? I said, my voice hard. Fine, let's talk about family. I ended the call and looked at Quinn. He raised his glass in a silent toast. Well, he said, this should be interesting. As I walked out into the cool night air, I felt 7 years of preparation crystallizing into this moment. Sullivan had no idea what was coming, but he was about to learn that the sister he'd left behind had become someone entirely new, someone who knew exactly how to make him pay attention. The boardroom buzzed with anticipation as I laid out our acquisition strategy. 10 pairs of eyes watched me pace in front of the projection screen, numbers and graphs flickering behind me. Sullivan Industries is undervalued, I explained, clicking to the next slide. Their patents alone are worth twice their current market cap. With their stock price at an all-time low, the timing is perfect. And their leadership? Asked Patricia, our most skeptical board member. The current CEO will be replaced. I cut in smoothly. That's non-negotiable. Zoe coughed quietly beside me. I caught her warning glance and softened my tone. Their management has proven ineffective. Change is necessary for the company's survival. After the meeting, Zoe followed me to my office. Well, that wasn't obvious at all. What wasn't? The way you practically snarled at the mention of their CEO. She perched on the edge of my desk. The board's going to start asking questions if you can't keep your cool. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Coming for Sunday dinner? I stared at the message, remembering all the Sunday dinners Sullivan had missed. 7 years of empty chairs and unspoken words. I need to see Quinn, I said, grabbing my coat. I found him at his favorite spot in the public garden, feeding pigeons despite the "do not feed wildlife" signs. He looked up as I approached, patting the bench beside him. I wondered when you'd show up, he said. The board approved the acquisition plan. And how does that make you feel? I threw a handful of breadcrumbs to the pigeons. Like I'm finally winning. Winning what? Don't do that, I snapped. Don't make this into some therapy session. Quinn's silence was louder than any response. We watched the pigeons squabble over breadcrumbs until I couldn't stand it anymore. He took everything from us, I said. Our family, our trust, our dignity. He made Mom cry every Sunday for a year. And this will fix that? Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Deacon. Turn on CNBC, he said without preamble. Sullivan's doing damage control. I pulled up the live stream on my phone. There was my brother, looking more polished than his last appearance, standing at another podium. Rumors of a hostile takeover are greatly exaggerated, he was saying. Sullivan Industries remains committed to independence and growth. Quinn leaned over to watch. Interesting choice of words. Independence. He's always been independent, I said bitterly. That's the problem. The camera panned to show Rosalie standing beside him, her hand on his arm. They looked like the perfect power couple, except I could see the strain around his eyes, the way his hands gripped the podium too tightly. I should call Mom, I said suddenly, before she sees this. Good idea. Quinn nodded. Family should hear news from family. The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. Mom answered on the first ring. I was just thinking about you, she said. I'm making your favorite lasagna for Sunday. Mom. I took a deep breath. There's something I need to tell you. The silence on the other end stretched out after I explained everything. Finally, she spoke. Are you doing this for the right reasons? It's a smart business move, I said automatically. That's not what I asked. I watched a pigeon strut past, proud and purposeful. I'm doing it because I can, because he needs to see who I've become. And who is that, sweetheart? The question hit me harder than I expected. Quinn pretended to be completely absorbed in feeding the pigeons, but I knew he was listening. Someone who matters, I said finally. Someone he can't ignore. Mom sighed. You've always mattered, Tori. With or without a corner office. After we hung up, Quinn stood and brushed breadcrumbs from his coat. Your mother's a wise woman. She is, I agreed, but she's also too forgiving. And you're not forgiving enough, he countered. Be careful, Tori. Revenge is like holding a hot coal. You'll burn yourself trying to throw it at someone else. My phone buzzed again. Zoe with updates about the acquisition paperwork. The machinery was in motion. In a few weeks, I would be face to face with Sullivan, watching his world shift like mine had 7 years ago. Maybe I want to get burned, I told Quinn. He shook his head. No, you don't. You want justice. But remember, justice without mercy is just another form of cruelty. I stood up, straightening my jacket. Sometimes cruelty is earned. As I walked away, leaving Quinn with his pigeons and wisdom, I felt the weight of what was coming. Soon, Sullivan would learn that the sister he'd left behind had become someone with the power to reshape his world. The question was, would reshaping his world reshape mine too? The Boston Technology Summit was exactly the kind of event Sullivan loved. All glitz and networking, with champagne flowing freely. I watched from across the ballroom as he worked the crowd, that familiar, confident smile plastered on his face. Are you sure about this? Zoe whispered beside me. We could send someone else to make the initial contact. I adjusted my name tag, which read only TY's CEO. He won't recognize me. It's been 7 years and he's not exactly the type to read industry profiles. If you say so. Zoe grabbed 2 champagne flutes from a passing waiter. But try not to look like you're planning his murder. I forced my shoulders to relax and plastered on my best networking smile. Across the room, Sullivan was deep in conversation with a group of investors. Rosalie stood at his side, elegant as ever in a designer dress that probably cost more than my first car. Time to mingle, I said, moving toward their group. As I approached, I caught fragments of Sullivan's conversation. Confident that our new initiatives will turn things around. The market just needs time to... Time isn't always on our side, though, is it? I interrupted smoothly, stepping into the circle. Especially in tech. Sullivan turned, that practiced smile never wavering. Indeed. And you are... T-wise, I said, extending my hand. I've been following your company's situation with interest. His handshake was firm, professional. No hint of recognition in his eyes. All situations are temporary. We're implementing aggressive growth strategies. Growth strategies require capital, I pointed out, and trust from investors. Something flickered in his expression, a crack in the confident facade. Rosalie touched his arm protectively. My husband has the full support of our board, she said, and our family. I couldn't help myself. Family support is crucial, isn't it? Nothing worse than feeling abandoned by those closest to you. Sullivan's left eye twitched. If you'll excuse us, I see some people we need to speak with. Of course, I smiled. I'm sure we'll be seeing more of each other soon. As they walked away, Zoe appeared at my elbow. Well, that was subtle as a sledgehammer. Did you see his face when I mentioned family? I took a long sip of champagne. He actually flinched. Tori. Zoe hesitated. Maybe Quinn is right. Maybe... Don't. I cut her off. The paperwork is already in motion. There's no turning back now. Later that evening, I found myself at the bar, watching Sullivan work the room. He'd always been good at this, making people feel important, special. It's how he'd charmed his way into the Martin family. Quite the performance, isn't it? A voice beside me made me jump. It was Deacon. I didn't know you'd be here, I said. I never miss a chance to watch sharks circle. He ordered a scotch. Speaking of which, our legal team finished the preliminary paperwork. We can move whenever you're ready. I watched Sullivan laugh at something Rosalie said, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. How long until the offer becomes public? 48 hours, give or take. Once we file with the SEC, the news will break fast. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Saw Sullivan on the business news again. Are you okay? Before I could respond, Sullivan's voice carried across the bar. The market is cyclical. What goes down must come up. Unless someone pushes it further down, I muttered. Deacon raised an eyebrow. You know, when I first suggested this acquisition, I thought it was just business. But there's something personal here, isn't there? I met his gaze steadily. Everything's personal in business. Isn't that what you always say? He studied me for a moment. Just make sure whatever this is doesn't interfere with our bottom line. Trust me, I said, watching Sullivan and Rosalie glide toward the exit. The bottom line is exactly what I'm focused on. His bottom line. After they left, I stayed at the bar, nursing my drink and thinking about Sunday dinners and crossword puzzles. About the way Mom's voice still caught whenever she mentioned Sullivan's name. About the look in his eyes tonight when I'd mentioned family. That brief flash of, what? Guilt? Fear? Or just annoyance at a presumptuous stranger? My phone buzzed again. Quinn this time. How did it go? I typed back. He didn't recognize me. Quinn's response was immediate. Maybe that's not the real problem. I put my phone away without responding. In 48 hours, Sullivan's carefully constructed world would start to crumble. He'd discover that the sister he'd forgotten had become someone with the power to destroy everything he'd built. And yet, watching him tonight, I'd felt something unexpected. A hollow ache where satisfaction should have been. But it was too late for second thoughts. The machinery was in motion, and soon everyone would know exactly who T.Y.'s really was. The news broke at 9:01 a.m. sharp. I watched from my office as CNBC's ticker flashed the headline, Breaking, Wise Enterprises launches, Hostile Takeover Bid for Sullivan Industries. Zoe burst through my door without knocking. It's chaos out there. Sullivan's board is in emergency session. Their stock is going crazy and... My phone exploded with notifications. First came the text from Mom. Be careful, sweetheart. Then Quinn. Remember what we talked about. And finally Deacon. Boardroom. Now. Showtime, I said, straightening my jacket. The boardroom was packed when we arrived. Deacon stood at the head of the table, fielding calls from investors. Our legal team huddled in one corner, papers spread everywhere. Their CEO is demanding a meeting, Deacon announced as I walked in. Immediately. Good, I said, taking my seat. Set it up for this afternoon. Patricia cleared her throat. Perhaps someone else should handle the initial... No, I cut her off. I'll do it. Tori, Zoe whispered. Maybe they're right. You're too close to this. Before I could respond, the TV on the wall caught everyone's attention. Sullivan was making an emergency press statement outside his office building. This hostile takeover attempt is unwarranted and unwelcome, he declared, looking directly into the cameras. Sullivan Industries is not for sale. Rosalie stood behind him, her face a mask of controlled concern. The reporters shouted questions. What about the falling stock price? How will you fight this? Do you know T.Y.'s personally? Sullivan's eye twitched at the last question. I've had limited interaction with their CEO, but I can assure you, this attempt will fail. Limited interaction, I repeated softly. That's one way to put it. My phone rang. It was Mom again. I stepped out to take the call. I saw him on TV, she said without preamble. He looks terrible. He should. Tori. She paused. Is this really what you want? Before I could answer, Zoe poked her head out. They're here, Sullivan and his team. Mom, I have to go. Just remember, whatever happens, you're still my daughter, and he's still your brother. I ended the call and took a deep breath. When I walked into the conference room, Sullivan was already seated, flanked by his lawyers. He stood when I entered, that practiced smile in place. Ms. Wise, I believe we met at the... His voice trailed off as recognition finally hit. The color drained from his face. Tori? Hello, Sullivan. I sat down across from him. It's been a while. This is impossible. He looked at his lawyers, then back at me. You can't be... The CEO of Wise Enterprises? The one trying to buy your company? I smiled. Surprise. His lawyers shifted uncomfortably. One whispered something in his ear, but Sullivan waved him off. Is this some kind of joke? He demanded. Some kind of revenge? Revenge? I kept my voice level. This is business, Sullivan. Just like your marriage was business, remember? A strategic decision? He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I won't let you destroy everything I've built. Like you destroyed our family? That's not... I didn't... For once, he seemed at a loss for words. Deacon cleared his throat. Perhaps we should focus on the terms of the offer. The terms are simple, I said, sliding a folder across the table. We buy controlling interest. You step down. Clean break. Sullivan's hands shook as he opened the folder. This is insane. You're my sister. Am I? I thought we were just complicated. Isn't that what you called us? His lawyers huddled around him, whispering urgently. I could see the moment he realized how trapped he was. The same look he'd had as a kid when he got caught in a lie. I need time, he said finally, to consider options. You have 24 hours, I replied, standing up. Oh, and Sullivan? Maybe call Mom sometime. She still does crosswords on Sunday mornings. I walked out before he could respond, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Zoe caught up with me at the elevator. Well, that was intense, she said. It's not over yet. No, she agreed. But are you sure this is what you wanted? The look on his face, I thought about that look. Shock giving way to recognition, then fear, then something else. Something that looked almost like shame. What I want, I said as the elevator doors closed, is for him to understand what he did. Really understand. But as we descended, I couldn't shake the memory of his shaking hands or the way his voice cracked when he said, sister. 7 years of planning, and somehow victory felt different than I'd imagined. Tomorrow, Sullivan would have to make his choice. And so, I realized, would I? 24 hours later, I stood at the podium in Sullivan Industries' main conference room, facing a sea of shocked faces. The acquisition was complete. Sullivan had folded faster than anyone expected. As your new CEO, I announced, I want to assure everyone that this transition will be smooth and... The door burst open. Sullivan stormed in, Rosalie right behind him. You can't do this, he shouted. These people trust me, they depend on me. Security moved to intercept him, but I held up my hand. Let him speak. After all, family should always have a voice, right, Sullivan? The room went deadly quiet. Employees exchanged confused glances. Rosalie's perfectly maintained composure cracked. Family? She whispered. Sullivan, what is she talking about? I stepped away from the podium. Oh, he didn't tell you. I'm his sister. The one he erased from his life 7 years ago when he married into your family. Sullivan's face reddened. That's not what happened. I was protecting what? I cut him off. Your image? Your social climbing? Tell them, Sullivan. Tell them how you got married without telling your own mother. How you never invited us to a single family event. How you pretended we didn't exist because we weren't good enough for your new life. Rosalie took a step back from him. Is this true? Rosalie, please. He reached for her hand. I can explain. Explain what? I pressed. How you told us it was a strategic decision to exclude your family from your wedding? Or how about explaining to your employees how you've been making the same kind of strategic decisions with their careers? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could see recognition dawning on some faces. Employees who'd been let go without warning. Projects canceled without explanation. That's different, Sullivan protested. Business decisions are just like family decisions to you. I finished. Disposable when inconvenient. Rosalie's voice shook. 7 years, and you never once mentioned a sister, a mother. Because he was ashamed, I said. Not of us, but of himself. Sullivan's lawyers appeared at the door, but he waved them away. For the first time, I saw his carefully constructed facade completely crumble. "You don't understand," he said, his voice breaking. "I had to become someone else. Someone worthy of—" "Worthy?" Rosalie interrupted. "My family would have welcomed yours with open arms. We're not monsters, Sullivan." "No," I agreed. The monster was the one who thought his own family would embarrass him. The room had grown so quiet you could hear phones buzzing with incoming news alerts. Our takeover was making headlines, but not for the reasons anyone expected. "I want to meet them," Rosalie suddenly announced. "Your mother. I want to know the family my husband denied me." Sullivan's face went pale. "Rosalie, please." "Mom still sets a place for you," I told him. "Every Sunday, even after 7 years." Something in his expression changed, a crack in the armor I'd been trying to break through for 7 years. "I never meant," he started. "To hurt us?" I finished. "To break Mom's heart? To pretend your own sister was a stranger at a business conference?" Security shifted uncomfortably. Employees whispered among themselves. Rosalie stood apart from Sullivan now, her arms crossed. "The board meeting starts in 10 minutes, I announced to the room. "Everyone except the executive team is dismissed. And Sullivan, you might want to call Mom. She's probably watching this on the business news right now." As people filed out, Sullivan remained rooted to the spot. Rosalie touched his arm briefly. "I'll be at my mother's," she said quietly. "When you're ready to tell me the whole truth about your family, your real family, you know where to find me." She walked out, leaving Sullivan looking more lost than I'd ever seen him. For a moment, I saw my brother again. Not the polished CEO, but the kid who used to protect me from playground bullies. "Was it worth it?" I asked softly. "Trading us for all this?" He looked around the conference room, at the empty chairs and the logo he'd built his life around. "I don't know anymore," he whispered. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart. But remember, healing takes more courage than hurting." I looked at Sullivan, still standing there like a statue. "Board meeting's in 8 minutes, I said. "You can stay if you want. Or you can go call Mom. Your choice. But this time, make it for the right reasons." He met my eyes for the first time. Really met them. And I saw something there I hadn't expected. Recognition. Not just of who I was, but of who he'd been. Who he'd become. And maybe, just maybe, who he could be again. The choice was his now. And for the first time in 7 years, I honestly didn't know what he would choose. Sullivan chose the board meeting. Of course he did. But 2 hours later, as I sat in my new office, his old office, he appeared in the doorway, looking more disheveled than I'd seen him in 7 years. "I called Mom," he said quietly. "I set down the acquisition papers I'd been reviewing." "And?" She cried. He ran a hand through his hair. She cried, and all she said was, "I'm making lasagna on Sunday." "That's Mom for you." He took a tentative step into the office. "You've done well for yourself." "No thanks to you." "Is that what this is about?" He gestured around the office. "Proving something to me?" "Not everything is about you, Sullivan." I stood up. "Though that's always been hard for you to understand." "Then explain it to me," he said, dropping into a chair. "Explain how my little sister engineered a hostile takeover just to prove a point." "A point?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk about points? Let's talk about Mom working double shifts to put you through business school. Let's talk about her skipping meals so you could have new suits for interviews. Let's talk about how you repaid that by erasing us from your life." "I didn't erase you," he protested. "I was trying to protect—" "If you say protect one more time, I swear to God." "Fine." He stood up so quickly the chair toppled backward. "I was ashamed. Is that what you want to hear? I was ashamed of our cramped apartment, of Mom's waitress uniform, of everything that reminded me of where I came from." The words hung in the air between us. Outside, the city hummed with afternoon traffic, oblivious to our drama unfolding 30 stories up. "Rosalie called me," I said finally. She's having dinner with Mom tonight. Sullivan's face went pale. What? Funny how your wife turns out to be a better person than you gave her credit for. He slumped against the wall. I've lost everything, haven't I? No, I said sharply. You gave everything away. There's a difference. My phone buzzed. Zoe reminding me about the press conference scheduled for tomorrow. The official announcement of the new leadership structure. You know what the worst part is? I continued. Mom never stopped loving you. Never stopped defending you. Sullivan's just busy, she'd say. Sullivan's building his future. Even when you missed her birthday. Even when you sent a generic Christmas card addressed to family. I can't change the past, he whispered. No, but you can stop running from it. I walked to the window, looking out at the city. You have a choice now, Sullivan. Keep pretending to be someone you're not, or remember who you really are. And who am I? His voice cracked. The ambitious brother who betrayed his family? The failed CEO who lost his company to his sister? You're the kid who taught me to ride a bike, I said, still facing the window. Who helped me with my math homework? Who promised Mom we'd always take care of each other? When I turned around, he was crying. Actually crying, like I hadn't seen since Dad's funeral. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted. Start with Sunday dinner, I suggested. Mom's making lasagna, remember? He wiped his eyes. Just like that? After everything? No, not just like that. You have a lot to make up for. To Mom, to Rosalie, to me. But you have to start somewhere. My phone buzzed again. Mom this time. Rosalie is lovely. Bringing her famous apple pie on Sunday. Will we need 2 pies? I showed Sullivan the text. His hands shook as he read it. I don't deserve this chance, he said. Probably not, I agreed. But that's the thing about family, real family. They love you anyway. He handed back my phone. What about the company? The company stays with me. You need to focus on fixing what's really broken, and it's not your stock price. He nodded slowly. I should go find Rosalie. Yes, you should. I sat back down at my desk. And Sullivan? Mom likes yellow roses, in case you were wondering what to bring on Sunday. He paused at the door. Tori, I'm sorry. For everything. I know, I said. Now prove it. After he left, I called Quinn. Well, he answered. Did revenge taste as sweet as you imagined? I thought about Sullivan's tears, about Mom's lasagna, about Rosalie's apple pie. It wasn't about revenge in the end, I realized. It was about breaking down the walls he built, even if I had to use a corporate battering ram to do it. Quinn chuckled. And now? I looked at the family photo on my desk, the old one from before everything changed. Now we see if he remembers how to be a brother again. The scent of Mom's lasagna filled the house as I helped set the table. 5 places, not just the usual 3. Zoe had brought wine and Rosalie's apple pies cooled on the counter. He's late, Mom said, checking her watch for the 3rd time. He'll come, Rosalie assured her, arranging flowers in a vase, yellow roses, just as I'd suggested. The doorbell rang. Mom froze, her hand clutching her crossword puzzle. I squeezed her shoulder as I passed. Sullivan stood on the porch, looking nothing like the polished CEO he'd been just days ago. He wore jeans and a simple sweater, holding a small wrapped package. I wasn't sure, he started. Just come in, I said. He stepped into the house and stopped short. The walls still held the same family photos he'd turned his back on. His graduation, my dance recitals, Mom's birthday parties. Nothing's changed, he whispered. Everything's changed, I corrected. But some things stay the same. Mom appeared in the hallway. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Sullivan crossed the space between them in 3 steps and wrapped her in a hug. I'm sorry, he said into her hair. I'm so sorry, Mom. She held him tight, and I saw tears rolling down her cheeks. My boy, she whispered. My beautiful, foolish boy. Rosalie and Zoe appeared from the kitchen, giving them space. I moved to join them, but Sullivan caught my arm. Wait, he said, pulling back from Mom. He handed her the package. Open it, please. Mom unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a leather-bound book. She opened it and gasped. It's every crossword puzzle I missed, Sullivan explained. 7 years of Sundays. I did them all last night. Even the ones I got wrong, I kept them. Because that's what family does, right? We keep trying, even when we mess up. Mom touched the pages gently. You remembered. I never forgot, he said. I just lost my way. Well, Zoe announced, breaking the tension. The wine isn't getting any younger, and that lasagna smells amazing. We gathered around the table, the same table where I'd first seen Sullivan's wedding announcement all those years ago. Mom insisted he sit in his old spot, across from me. To new beginnings, Rosalie proposed, raising her glass. And old traditions, Mom added. Sullivan cleared his throat. I have something else to say. He looked at me. I've been thinking about what you said, about fixing what's really broken. I'm starting therapy next week, and I've enrolled in a community college teaching program. Teaching? I set down my fork. But I always said what I thought would impress people, he interrupted. But before all that, before the suits and the corner office, I loved tutoring kids in math. Remember? I did remember. He'd volunteered at the community center all through high school. What about your image? I couldn't help asking. He smiled, a real smile, not the practiced one I'd grown to hate. I think I'm done with images. Time to be real. Speaking of real, Rosalie chimed in. We're moving out of the mansion. Found a nice place closer to here, actually. Just a few blocks away. Mom dropped her fork. Really? If that's okay, Sullivan added quickly. We thought maybe we could do this more often. Sunday dinners. Every Sunday? Mom's voice wavered. Every Sunday, he confirmed. No more missed crosswords. Later, as we shared Rosalie's apple pie, I watched Sullivan help Mom with that day's puzzle. Zoe leaned over to whisper, Still glad you orchestrated that hostile takeover? I thought about it. You know what's funny? I thought taking his company would be the victory. But this... I gestured at the scene before us. Mom laughing at Sullivan's terrible pun, Rosalie sharing family recipes, the yellow roses brightening our modest dining room. This is the real win. You know? Sullivan called out, looking up from the puzzle. 6 down is redemption. No, it's not, Mom corrected. It's beginning. We all laughed, and in that moment, I felt the last pieces of my anger melt away. The brother who'd abandoned us was gone, but in his place was someone new, someone real, someone trying. And maybe that's what family is. Not the perfect image we present to the world, but the messy, complicated reality of people who keep showing up, keep trying, keep loving even when it's hard. Hey, Tori, Sullivan said softly as we cleared the dishes. Thank you for not giving up on me. I handed him a plate to dry. That's what big shot CEOs do for their little brothers. He laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound I hadn't heard in 7 years. Outside, the sun was setting on another Sunday, but this time no chairs sat empty. This time every crossword square was filled with possibility, filled with possibility, filled with possibility, filled with possibility, filled with possibility,